We really should have waiting parents, not waiting children. Over 100,000 children are available for adoption through the U.S. foster care system, and 27% don't have anyone, like a relative or foster parent, in the process of adopting them. 60% are between the ages of 5 and 17, and 2/3 are part of sibling groups of 2 to 8 children. Hey listener, my name is Marcy Bursack. My husband and I chose adoption as our plan A. After blogging about our journey adopting a sibling pair, I began mentoring families right in my own living room. That passion grew into the Forgotten Adoption Option, a nonprofit I now lead as a volunteer while working full-time in the tech industry. From my blog, 3 books, app, and classroom lesson to now a 45-minute course called Foster Care Adoption Simplified, which you can find at ForgottenAdoptionOption.com, I've created practical, heartfelt resources to help families navigate the foster care adoption process. As you listen to this episode, I encourage you to ask yourself, who in my circle needs to hear this? It's often people in what we call helper professions, people like therapists, nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, social workers, and teachers like my husband. These are the people who tend to step forward to adopt children from foster care. But this work isn't only about becoming an adoptive family, it's also about becoming an advocate and ally. Every waiting child deserves not just a forever family, but a community of people who champion their future. Whatever led you to this podcast, I am thrilled that you are here. My mission is simple, to help every waiting child be with their forever family. And that's exactly why I host this podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we will discuss how an aunt cares for a sibling group in her family tree through the foster care system. In 2024, I had the opportunity to travel to Seattle for the Global Beauty Awards. Thank you for the nomination, Wendy Russo. I was nominated for the Denise White category for my foster care adoption advocacy work. And a friend and I decided this was the perfect opportunity for a girls' trip and treated ourselves to professional hair and makeup and formal gowns for the award ceremony. So we figured, let's just go. No matter what happens, let's just have some fun. And there we are sitting in this hotel room, a few down from our own. And as our hair is getting curled faster than I'd ever seen done before by this woman named Vanessa, organically, we got talking about why I was even there at the Global Beauty Awards. And Vanessa told me that she was taken in by her Aunt Rene, and that I definitely needed to meet Aunt Rene. So Renee's here. Hey, Rene.
Hello.
I love that family nature of this. This is such a cool story. So Rene and I have a lot in common. One of it is by day she works in tech like me, and she's a single woman. She cares for her sister's children. So in the foster care space, this is a term called kinship, like caregiver or kinship placement. So kin means that you're either a family member, typically someone related by blood. There's also another term, fictive kin, which means maybe the baseball coach or the teacher. But Rene is like blood to these kids. It's amazing. And I think you're really going to find her story incredibly remarkable. I have, and also empathize with some of the challenges that she has faced and does face. So Rene, I think we should introduce you. Maybe pre-kids, tell us about your life, then and what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to share the story, and it's just so unique how this all came together because you got to meet 2 fantastic people in my life. So it's hard to remember life before this and then life after, right? It's really 2 different paths. But prior, I was a single mom, or not a single mom, single executive, traveling the country, going to happy hours, just no real responsibilities outside of my job and my home.
Career woman. You're I got this. I'm doing the career thing. I'm kind of good at it. And
I was really enjoying it, meeting a lot of people. I was participating in a lot of our industry boards and really got a good voice in that area and just was loving what I was doing. And then afterwards, it just changed. Everything changed, all of a sudden I have this young 10-year-old girl that's coming to live with me, and I wasn't quite sure what to do.
I don't think any of us would be. I know my husband and I often kind of play out the story of okay, if all of a sudden one of our siblings needed someone to fill in, you want to say yes, right? How do you do that? And in a scenario like yours, there's a different kind of yes, right? Because with your sister, there's some sort of family struggle, and then her kids are going into foster care. So it's like a very interesting dynamic. And then you start getting more involved with her kids. So I'm curious, can you tell us kind of how you were even aware that things were happening, and then like how you got involved, and if that was easy? I imagine it's not, or difficult for you, because you were living in a different state from your sister too, right?
Yeah, my sister was in Oregon and I was in Washington State. She had been living in Washington and then moved to Oregon, and later I found out it was really to get away from CPS in Washington. And so she was drinking a lot. Um, I we'll talk about Thomas, but she has three children. One went to live with his dad. The second child was severely abused and was put into foster care at that time too. And so my sister had really gone through some mental health issues and drugs and alcohol, and it got worse after Thomas was injured, and that was by, a boyfriend. But so I kind of kept tabs on Vanessa a lot. I was the cool aunt, all the kids like to come stay with me, and so I tried to stay really close to that. And when she was pulled into foster care, they didn't allow the family, because we were all in Washington, to have any say or any connection to come down and get her. And then I had some family in Oregon that they wouldn't place with either, for a variety of different reasons. None of them seem good at this point. But we were fortunate. She was placed in she went to two homes, two very good homes. But then I had talked about, having her come live with me. And as you know, that doesn't happen very quickly. And they ended up placing her with her father, which I knew was going to be a disaster. And so I stayed really close to him. He didn't actually lose his parental rights. My sister had lost hers. And so that just complicated things a lot.
Because they're not
So,
together at this point, right? Like,
no,
so that, yeah.
no,
Yep,
no.
been there. Yep, they each get to have their own course. Yeah, that's great.
Yep. And so because
So long, yeah.
he didn't do whatever was wrong at the time she was taken into care, they had to prove that he wasn't fit, which I already knew was going to happen. And it did. And she was taken back into foster care a second time. And then that's when they really seriously pursued me being able to take her. And you talk about the kinship, because we were in separate states, they didn't consider it kinship. I had to actually get certified as a foster parent in Washington State, as if I was taking in any child. It was really kind of crazy, and the things between Oregon and Washington and how they worked. But yeah, she was a strong little girl, though. She is amazing. She turned her mom in, and the police came, and they came, and yeah. So
There's a lot in there, and people can't see us. We're on Zoom. We look at each other, but you all can't see us. But my head just like turned a total like 45-degree angle. Like, okay, so I'm confused. And it is confusing, I think, on the whole, because the foster care system, we are the United States of America. We don't play at child welfare like we are, right? It's very like this state doesn't play with that state, even though they're actually right next to each other. So that's crazy, right? Like you are family. So if we rewound, Rene, and you were in Oregon with your sister at the time this was all happening, would your process have been entirely different?
Oh, I believe so. I don't know for sure, of course.
Sure.
I don't think I would have needed to get certified as a foster parent. I could have just done the kinship and signed some paperwork, and I think she would have come to live with me much, much sooner than what she did. Fortunately for me, though, the foster parents that she was with, we are still friends to this day. They're amazing people.
Aww.
They let me into their house. They let me come down and stay with them. But yeah, I think if we would have been in the same state, I think getting the answers that I needed would have been easier. I'd call Washington, and Washington would tell me I needed to talk to Oregon, and then Oregon would tell me I needed to talk to Washington. And then in Washington, you have a child advocate, but in Oregon, the child actually has their own attorney. In Washington, they don't do that. So I think that benefited us for sure by her having her own attorney that was looking out for Vanessa's best interest. And he or she really kept in great contact with me. And, at first we wanted to adopt right away, and I was so determined to adopt. And they convinced me not to, that it would actually drag it out because dad hadn't lost his rights. So we
Wow.
basically kind of had to, I don't want to say trick or manipulate him, but he didn't know that once the guardianship was put in place. So I never legally adopted her. I was legal guardian for that whole time.
You had to be selective on what you share the information so you could help her have some stability. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Wow.
was
Okay. And terminology wise, so the attorney that she had, because some states have like a guardian ad litem. What was there a title for that person?
it was just her attorney. Yeah,
Child's attorney.
child's
Okay.
attorney. Yeah, there was no other title. Oh.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds crazy supportive. And you had mentioned Vanessa turned her mom in. And then
Yes.
you also mentioned a part about the state piece, because I think part of us are like, wait a minute, there is good value to live by family. So if anyone like listens to this and they're like, Marcy, I'm moving, yeah, like maybe you should try to be in the same state. It might be easier. I don't know that you would want to move back then. But some of us might get ideas just from how you're explaining, or maybe we should all just change the system and help the states play together so that it is a little bit easier for others.
Right. Like, I don't know. I wish there was a national program because
Uh-huh.
it just doesn't make it easy for the families to take in kids. It's really kind of ridiculous when you have the amount of money and time that you spend and the trauma that happens to a child to be separated from their family for that long is really not okay. Right. And I think if I would have moved to Oregon, if we were in today's world where we have more video and working from home
Yeah,
options, that
different time.
would have been a different time. I could have gone down there and camped, right next to them.
Do we think all the WebExes and the Zooms and the people that are working in that space? Yeah, because I could imagine someone with a similar story nowadays might be able to take a different path in that.
And I think, one thing I would tell people is I'm not a very timid person, but I was a little timid because of this legal thing that was going on and going in front of a judge and if I had advice for people, it would definitely be like, use your voice. Don't let them intimidate you because they are a judge or they're an attorney or they're whatever their legal title was. They're just people, right? And we are fighting for the kids. And looking back, I wouldn't have been quite so intimidated by that process. Or I would hope that I wasn't, right? Would really go in there with confidence. But when you go in, they give you no information.
Right.
So you're going in really blind, and they just want to push you through. So, or not. Sometimes it takes way too long. So
it does. And I wonder, because I was sharing with you before we started recording that, I know we have some listeners that are maybe educators or kind of in a role that I know we have people that are mandated reporters like my husband is. And so I'm curious if you could kind of give us a little peek into for Vanessa, when she told on her mom, reported her, was it a trusted adult in her life at that time?
she was staying, it actually wasn't a required reporter, it was a neighbor. She'd gone over to the neighbor's house to play and hang out. Yes, absolutely. And she's friends with her today. But was hanging out actually with just some of the bigger kids. And my sister wanted her to come home and blow in. She had a DUI and wanted her to blow into the thing and go to the store. And Vanessa said, I'm not going to do it. And so then they called her mom and then they called the police. And then that's where the story, I think it's important. Like, I'm sharing some details. Vanessa knows that we're meeting. She knows that I'm telling her story and we have her permission. So I'm not just sharing things that, it's her story for sure, or both of our stories, but she's well aware of us having this conversation and she's at peace with that. So that's good.
Which is a beautiful, she's an adult, right? There's pieces to this. And I love that too, that, you've taken that added measure. Cause I'm pretty protective over my kids. I'm like, they're still too young, that's not a public story for them. And I just remember sitting there with Vanessa Yeah, it's just such a, you're in this like hair and makeup fun room and doing all
Yeah.
these things. And it's just, yeah, it is your story. And I really respect that you guys have gotten on the same page of, that's okay in that space. There's a lot of growth in that space. So I'm curious though, because you're this woman who's got this career thing, and then you're like, total turn. I'm going to be a mom now. All of a sudden, how did your employer respond to that?
But actually very supportive. Um, However, I would have asked for more time off because I think I might have taken a week, um, one whole week. But my boss was fantastic. He's the CEO and president, and we've always talked about family being important. And I remember sitting in his office, and he was giving me parenting advice. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But he had told me, set up routines with Vanessa. Have something every year that you go do together. Take 2 weeks off every summer, at the same time every year. So they were very, very supportive. And any of the court hearings I had to go to or school events, I'm very fortunate that I work for a company that's as good as my company, so it was never an issue, thankfully.
Makes all the difference. And I'm curious because you even earlier as you were talking about like the opportunity of, okay, I need to help my niece. I mean, your life is completely interrupted, right? Like everything you were doing. And I'm very curious because I think some people are thinking I've thought about doing this, but like it doesn't feel convenient or not the right time, or that's a huge sacrifice. And I realize this is family, so it might be an added layer of like that's just what you do. But how did you wrap your head and heart around, yep, I'm just gonna figure it out, and everything that I loved about being single, everything I loved about living on my own, like you gave all that up?
I'm not gonna lie, I was scared, and
Yeah.
I was mad. I think it's important to know that it's okay for that. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was really mad at my sister. I was mad at the system. Like, why do I have to give up my life? And it was never about Vanessa. Like that's without a doubt. But I didn't go into it just saying, come on, let's just do it. I spent some good heart wrenching moments with myself and with God, and what's the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, now you're going to make me cry, Marcy, but at the end of the day, I was just thinking of, here's this little girl that needs a chance in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and I am her only chance at this moment. And so I'm getting choked up that she loved me and I loved her, and we were just going to get through it and do whatever. And part of working in tech and IT, there's always a solution, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
this way of trying to discover how to do it, and a super great support system. Outside of, I did, during that time period, I lost my mom,
Ah.
and so the year that Vanessa came, it was complete chaos. My best friend had died, boyfriend moved away. Then I got Vanessa. Then my mom died a few months later. And so we had quite the challenge, like, but yeah, it was hard to get my head wrapped around it.
Well, especially when you're going through so much like grieving on so many levels and everything you just shared, like that's so incredibly heavy.
Yeah, I took her on business trips with me actually,
Yeah.
which was interesting. And people in the business trips, would just like kind of take her in, and um yeah, it was not easy. It was a hard process. So if people are thinking about it, like one, yeah, do your homework. And again, just spend some quiet time and just really look at your life and what this is for the child. Like, um, I guess I'm having a hard time describing really what I mean. Like, none of us plan to have kids, or most people don't. Even people who have biological kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's never a good time, ever. You just have to dive in. So,
It's fair. That's fair. It just kind of
yeah.
is like, well, here we go. But yeah, your sentiment is one I think about a lot too, in terms of like, man, if that was me, like so much of life changes because of where what kind of environment we're in, right? Like,
Right.
especially in childhood. And you know, there's so many statistics, people can Google it, but like just what happens when a kid has a stable home environment, just what happens when they graduate high school that way. Like it does so much for their entire future. And it is for you to know that and see that and be like, well, I can do it. And you would see if not.
Yeah, and I can remember seeing, I was asking a friend, I'm like, what do you do with a kid all day? And they're like,
Nice.
nothing. I'm like, what do you mean nothing? Like, yeah, how am I going to entertain? How am I going to keep this kid active all day?
Mhm.
Like, you don't. They go to their room, they read, they go outside and play. They, like, I was like, really? Because I was, again, the fun aunt. We always did exciting, fun things and.
You're like, I don't know how to do a long-term thing. Yeah. So how old was Vanessa though when she moved in with you? How old was she?
She was 10. Yeah, 10 or 11. Maybe 11. So
Sure.
she's still at home. So even though she's an adult, she's at home. So it's been 12 years. So yeah. 11. I think she just turned 11 when she came.
That's so amazing. And I know that, so as we were preparing for this episode, you had shared with me that there were like resources that she could have had for free, but you all had to pay out of pocket for, which is crazy because there's just the marketing and the communication and the finding is really, really hard in this space. So I'm curious if you could share with us kind of what resources were available. And if somebody were like in your footsteps a few years behind you and they're like, how do I find those things and not have to pay? Where would they even go to find these things?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I didn't know, and we learned when she graduated high school, because she aged out right as she was graduating. And they had called me, and there was a school liaison. And so I would have found that school liaison early on, and it's the McKinney-Vento Assistance Program. It's like I think it's a nationwide program, and each state handles it differently, and each school district handles it differently. But at that time, I had found out, well, they listed her as homeless, which was shocking to me because I'm like, she's not homeless. But she started telling me that there were things like academic support we could have had, fee waivers, we could have had school uniforms paid for, any of the equipment that she needed for school. And I didn't know any of that like until she was graduating. And there's assistance for college, so all the college application fees are paid for, which I did learn before we paid for too many of those. But yeah, I had no idea. She came to my house. We had visits for a couple months, and then hands were washed and everyone was gone, and it was as if I was mom. I didn't even know who to
Children's division, you were mom, but to school, she was homeless. Like,
right? I was kind of mad when they said that because I'm like, she's homeless. We live in a nice neighborhood in a beautiful home. We have everything we want and need. But yeah, like she's homeless. And I think that's because she stayed in legal guardianship, and we have a lot of reasons why that happened. And we're still talking about adoption to this day, which is interesting. But yeah, I think that might have been the reason. I think the other, the resources, I would have spent more time. Maybe I would have gone to DSHS office and tried to find the person who knew who to talk to in Oregon and Washington, because no matter who I called, might have made a few more trips, face to face to people, because it's hard to ignore you when you're face to face. I would have asked more questions of the judge and the attorney at the time that we were going through the whole process, just to find that out. But yeah.
It's so messy. And I know for some people, if you're newer to this space, because the acronyms get kind of wild, because there's not a national program. So in some states, you might hear Children's Division, or you might hear like the Department of Health and Human. They're all, it just, you can, Google yourself and have a good time with that. But it's like every state sort of divides it, like the state's in charge. But I recently had help with an article for Fostering Families Today magazine that was specific to kinship and legal representation, which I was like, this was not my path, but I am so willing to research a topic I didn't know. And I learned, I don't know if you've heard this, there's something called the Kinship Navigator Program, where it's like an entire website where you can, and every state's like not in the database, but like a lot of states are in this database where basically they've made like a directory, I'm calling it this, of like services, so you can find like referrals and like where to get information, learn what benefits you qualify for. I didn't know this was a thing.
I didn't know it was a thing. No one, and maybe it wasn't 12 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
I think it looks like federal funding increased in 2018. So it's not, it would have been after Vanessa was with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had no idea, but I might use it now because I don't know if I told you, I actually have legal guardianship of my disabled nephew as well.
Which is Vanessa's brother, right?
Yes, Vanessa's brother, and he's an adult, but severely injured. So I may use that for some research for the things that I have to do with him. So
yeah, do it. And maybe you can look at both states and ask why your state, doesn't have the other stuff. And I'm glad at least somebody's trying to organize things.
Right.
So much of it, right, is going to ask and finding and reminding, and it's a lot of legwork.
And you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes you don't even know the right questions to ask. Or you talked about the acronyms. The same thing is not knowing what a program is called, or if it was kinship, or if it was whatever those things are, right? You don't know what those labels are. So I would encourage people to even ask for definition of that. If they're working with somebody, ask them what kinship, what does that really mean, right? And just ask more questions. And
if you feel like you're asking too many questions, keep asking more questions. You are
Exactly.
not. I know. It's like, just keep going.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay. So you mentioned it's been like 10 years, like a whole decade. And the Rene your life has changed in so many ways. Like here you are, I'm sure 10 years ago, you had no idea, like
12 years.
12 years ago, you'd have no idea that like, this is where you'd be now. I'm sure you had a very different idea in your head, but I'm curious if you, especially being a single parent, which is actually quite a few people that adopt through foster care. Like this is a pretty common demographic. I'm very curious, like, how would you encourage the people following your footsteps, or 12 years ago, Rene, like, what would you remind them or give them pointer? Kind of like you're sitting down with your boss and they're like, I'm a parent, let me help you. What would you say to these people?
I would say get a good circle of friends, get to know your neighbors, because my neighbors helped a lot, picking up from school. Heavy in faith, my faith is very strong, and so that's helped. A good glass of wine and a hot bathtub. But really, like, give yourself that space and that time, right? Like to decompress, because kids are challenging anyways. And then you have a child that's coming in with a lot of trauma and trying to unwind those things as they get more comfortable. I laugh about the bathtub, but I really did. I took a lot of hot bubble baths.
The one thing you could be alone for, right? Closing the door, I'm gone.
Yes, right. Yeah. And you can just like be in there yourself. But I didn't have a lot of family around me. So I just had to create a network, church family, girlfriends, and not being afraid to ask somebody for the help, because I never wanted to ask for help, and I had to. It really humbled me. Really. Yeah.
That's so practical. Is there anything that, looking back, you would like have redone if you could?
Boy, it's always hard. I try not to live my life in that way, that I would look and do things differently. And because it's 12 years now, technology is different, resources are different. I think I would have given her and I a little more time to bond together. Like the first weekend she came to live with me, we went camping with friends. And
because you were the aunt, you were the cool aunt.
Yeah. But we didn't really have that really quiet, stable time. I would have taken time off of work. I would have taken maternity leave, honestly, to just have that 6 weeks or whatever we could have gotten to really just understand how we were going to navigate this new territory.
Yes. I've had similar thoughts in that space. I'm like, how come I didn't take longer?
Right. Well, because I think society and like this, there's not a space for this,
There's
right?
not.
Which
And
is
we're going to work
exactly
on
why
that,
you're doing it.
Rene. Yeah, we're going to
Yes,
work on this because I'm like, this needs
yes.
to be under parental leave, folks. Like, and it gets tricky, right? Well, what if you're not adopting the kid? And then there's all, I mean, you've got, yeah, there, it's complicated, but it's like, but give us more time.
It's the same time you need to adjust with a newborn or any other child, right? But
Yes.
probably even more so because they come with their stories and they're in foster
Mm-hmm.
care for usually not good reasons, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of that and trust that you have to build. And that's another thing. Maybe there's some way of like, how do you build trust? Like resources for that. And um, yeah, we tried counseling right away. That didn't work very well because, gung ho, go in there, talk about these things, but maybe
Not
more of a
ready.
coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe more of a coach. So,
Sure. But some of that stuff you just have to try and learn, right? It's just like anything with parenting. You're like, and that didn't work.
another really important thing that I learned, and maybe others can learn and benefit from it, is I had a lot of advice on parenting, right? And what worked for some of my friends who had children the same age, the tough love, or you take this away or you take that away, I really found didn't work in this situation because all she needed to know is she was loved, no matter what she did, what she did wrong. And she pushed my buttons and she pushed them hard. But what I was bound and determined to let her know is that she was always loved and always accepted. And no matter what she was doing, she was coming back, right? And so the punishments for things that she did were not as harsh, maybe, as some others, because that's what she was expecting, right? She was expecting to have things harder for her, and she wasn't expecting the love. So that would be the other advice I'd really have is just love them through everything. Doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, right? You have boundaries, but yeah, I think that's really super important.
Yeah. Because they're different. And I think that gets sometimes people don't understand what you're doing or have 2 cents. I think anyone does, right? Like people like to give parenting advice and we like to give our own parenting advice and it doesn't always work for everyone.
No.
But you've mentioned a lot about like your church community and your neighbors and things like that. And there might be some listeners that are thinking, well, how could I be that person for someone that I live by? And I'm curious, like kind of flipping it a little bit. Let's say like for Vanessa's scenario, she had this neighbor she could trust in. And what could a neighbor do or someone kind of around a child that like what are the warning signs they might have seen or even like what made this neighbor comfortable for Vanessa to tell them?
Oh,
Because
the
that's a
one
big
that she
deal.
had
Yeah.
that helped turn in. Wow. I've never met that person, which probably should go, but I think, when a child is coming to school stressed, she had a lot of stomach issues.
Mm.
Some of the signs, the hair was out of place. She was very temperamental, right? I think, you never want to judge or jump to judgment because we've had that in our family as well on the other side where really people were wrong, right? So I would
Mm.
say approach it with kindness and love first and understanding and maybe you just start talking to that kid. Help them plant flowers in your yard so that you start to have this conversation, right? Um, invite them over and look at, like, I have baby birds out, so the little girl across the street comes look at my baby birds. You kind of
Aw.
develop a little bit of a relationship with kids so that you can start to get in tune with what's happening or things that are going on because so many neighbors are private, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you see a child outside all the time by themselves, that might be a thing. But again, just don't rush to judgment, but just be curious, watch, try to understand, look, closer at things if they seem off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but get to know that kid. They may then open up to you, right? If you suspect something. I have a neighbor that she'll take all the little kids here and start a little garden for them.
Aw.
And she just talks to them and I think that's wonderful. So
That's so sweet. My
Yeah.
kids also had a neighbor who I've only seen the reports of what the neighbor said. Neighbor didn't have a name.
Yeah.
I'm like thankful for this neighbor that saw and did something
Yeah.
about it. But I'm also
Amazing.
curious. It is amazing. I'm curious for you because this is your sister.
Yeah.
Did you see warning signs? Like, not that you thought, oh, she's going to lose her kids, but were there things that you noticed that you were
Yeah.
like, oh man,
And those are things that it's always easier on the other side, right? And
totally.
how do you take a child away from a parent? And I
Mm,
knew that she wasn't parenting very well, but I didn't know really where that line was. She was leaving Vanessa a lot with friends as she would go out and go, the bars. She had a lot of dating different men around, which were all uncomfortable. It doesn't really make you a bad parent per se.
sure.
But her mental health was kind of deteriorating. I did see that. Um, it, if I knew, I knew. If I'm really honest with myself, I had this gut ache, this gut feeling, but I really didn't know how to take a child away from their parent and was that the right thing or not. And so I struggled with that for a long time. And then she moved, right? And then to keep things secret or get away from the chaos up here to be a better mom. She was very manipulative. So that's another thing, but listen to your gut. Your
Mm.
gut usually knows.
Do you think there's anything as a sibling you could have done that would have changed anything like earlier?
No, not with her. Mm-mm. She was, we never really got along. There was always something with her. Um, yeah, I don't think so. I think outside of really going to court and trying to take her, there's no way she would have let her just come stay, or give her up.
Family's hard, right? Because it's like
Yeah,
sometimes you just have to let things happen.
yeah, yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
I love that we've been able to cross paths, and
I
I
know.
think there's so many interesting pieces to your story of how it just happens, and you climbed through a very complicated cross state process, and now you have this really delightful daughter niece that do you call your niece your daughter or both? What do you call her at this point?
Both.
Nice.
Auntie Mama is sometimes what we call me, or I usually, when I'm introducing her, she's my daughter. Yeah.
I love that. I love
So,
that.
and then some people know differently, and so I'm like, well,
Sure.
niece and blah blah blah. But yeah, yep, she's my daughter wholeheartedly. Like she's mine. She's not getting away. I just really appreciate this, and I just feel like there's so much more. We could probably talk for a couple hours, right? There's so much to unpack, and as people are fighting the process, fighting their own feelings with their family, debating whether they want to do this or can do this or not.
Mm.
None of us can do anything the first time we try. We're all going to
You
mistakes,
mean you
right?
weren't just like able to do something like an expert the first Yeah.
No rule book, right?
Yeah. We're just willing, I think, is kind of how that all rolls. We try with what we think is best in the moment, right?
Yep. And my faith wasn't as strong then. So I want people to understand that that's okay too, right? Like my faith grew through time, but at that time it really wasn't. I wanted to be selfish.
Sure. Well, because it's hard. It's really hard. And my husband shares that he's my very first podcast episode, and he talks about like he loved the life without kids. Like you
Yeah.
give up so much.
Yep.
So much.
Yep.
So
Yep. You
much.
do
You
a
said
lot.
yes, but you said yes, and I appreciate you saying yes to talking about this. It's just so cool. We've been like texting, and it's fun to play in different time zones too, because you're a couple hours behind me, and it's just I'm so grateful for your passion to share and your openness to share. I think that helps people understand like that's probably someone going on in my school neighborhood or community too, and I probably just don't know. And so you're giving us some great nuggets of how to be aware and how to be open-minded and how to be kind. So thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for the opportunity again. And I just think it's such important work that you're doing. And there's so many kids in need, and there's so many great people out there that can help them along.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It truly matters that you listen today, because by tuning in, you're opening your heart to the stories of children in foster care, sparking empathy and starting to see how your unique role, whether as a friend, advocate, or even as a future adoptive parent, can bring hope and belonging to a child or sibling group that is waiting. I also want to personally invite you to reach out to me to ask anything that's on your heart. I promise no judgment. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and I mean it when I say you can ask anything. I know it can feel awkward to ask questions publicly, and that's why I carve out time during my lunch hour and evenings while my kids and husband are at martial arts to mentor others one-on-one. Your questions matter, your curiosity matters, and most importantly, the role you are playing in helping children in foster care matters. Together, we can bring hope and belonging. Until next time, take care and keep the conversation going.